Good morning, Riverfront family. Happy to be with you this morning. Hopefully you guys can hear me a little better this week. I apologize. Last week, I guess my input volume on my computer was turned down kind of low, and so the recording volume was not ideal. But hopefully you can hear me loud and clear this morning. I'm happy to be with you all this morning. This week and next week, Pastor Ben and I are going to be preaching specifically to our times. This is the Sunday before Election Day, and next Sunday will be the Sunday after Election Day. We will hopefully know a little bit more about the future of our country, and we wanted to just do kind of a 2-week mini sermon series to address these uncertain times and talk about what the role of people of faith during times like this is. So I want to start by asking a question. And if you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand. Maybe we'll all see each other. Is anybody else afraid of flying? Show of hands if you're a little bit afraid of flying, or a lot of it maybe. I am a little bit too medium amount afraid of flying. I don't enjoy flying at all. I get a lot of anxiety when I fly. I still do it because my in-laws live in California, and there have been other reasons I've needed to get on a plane. So I still do it, but I don't like it. And Arunan, who is Mr. Logical, is always reminding me that statistically, he says, I have a much greater chance of dying in a car crash than I do on an airplane, which is, of course, 0% helpful because for me, the fear and the anxiety of flying are not a rational thing, right? And so I can't be talked out of it by a statistical fact or by anything logical. It's not rational for me. It's all about control. It's all about control. I kind of wish that I could be flying the plane, because if I were flying the plane, I would know exactly what was going on, and then maybe I wouldn't be so scared anymore. When I'm flying and that fasten seatbelt sign comes on above me, a million thoughts go through my head. I'm like, is the plane going down? What's happening in the cockpit? What are the pilot and the assistant pilot, or whatever you call them, saying to each other? Like, what's going on behind the scenes? I just freak out and my brain starts racing, because in that moment, I don't know what it is that is causing the pilot to turn on the fasten seatbelt sign. And the not knowing just drives me crazy. It drives my anxiety through the roof, because I feel totally out of control of my own life. And of course, it is always just turbulence. I clearly have never been in a plane crash, despite the many flights I have taken. I'm here to tell this tale. It's always just turbulence, but in those moments of turbulence, it's the uncertainty of the moment that makes me feel panicky. And we are facing a ton of turbulence as a nation right now. 2020 has not been a good year for anybody, but it has especially not been a good year for control freaks like me, and maybe like some of you. We are on this plane in the middle of turbulence, and we don't know what's going on, and we are out of control, and we can't seem to get off the plane. It's like a nightmare plane, right? Every single one of us here today, listening to this sermon, is facing some kind of uncertainty in our lives. Will my marriage survive COVID? Being quarantined together in a house day in after day out. Will my kids go back to school or go from hybrid to full-time school? Or will my kids stay in school? Will school stay open? Will my family stay healthy? Will I be laid off? Will I get a job? When will this all be over? When will life be able to go back to normal? Or will it ever be able to go back to normal? And of course, the big one, how is Tuesday night going to go? When we go to bed on Tuesday night, what kind of state is our country going to be in? Who will win the election? If Trump loses the election, will he concede power? So many unknowns, and so much uncertainty in our lives right now. And here's the thing. It can be difficult, very difficult, almost impossible to be certain of God in uncertain times. It can be difficult to be certain of God in uncertain times. It can be easy to draw the conclusion that, maybe the God of the universe, the God who created all of us, the God we read about in Scripture, maybe that God just isn't interested in my life. God is so quiet. He seems so distant. I don't know about you, but when I pray and I talk to God, it can sometimes feel like a really one-sided conversation, like I'm talking to a brick wall or something. I kind of, I pour out my heart to God, and then I want to end my prayers with, okay, so what do you think? So what are you going to do about this situation I just told you about? You heard my opinion on the matter. What's your opinion? And maybe you ask those questions too, and maybe you don't always hear anything back. Maybe you're asking God to change the heart of your child, or wisdom for what to do in a particularly sticky parenting situation that you might be in. Or maybe you're a boss, maybe you're a manager, and you have to lay somebody off. Or maybe you're the one whose job is on the line, and you are praying and you're asking God, what am I supposed to do here? And you don't hear anything. Maybe you're single and you're asking God for a life partner or a family, and you hear nothing. Or maybe you feel like you don't want to spend the rest of your life with your spouse unless she or unless he changes. And you're asking God, what should I do? Should I leave him? Should I leave her? What should I do in this situation? When things are hard, when things are not great, it is tempting to think that God is not interested in the details of my life. And the scripture that we read this morning in the book of Genesis is the end of the story of Joseph. We all know about Joseph, right? The story of Joseph in the book of Genesis is so helpful when we wrestle with these questions, because it answers the big question that mankind, womankind, has always wrestled with, which is, how do we follow God in uncertain times? How do we faithfully follow God when God is silent and things are uncertain? So let's jump into the story. We read the end of it this morning, but I want to go back to the very beginning of it. It's a story that a lot of you are probably familiar with. It's one of the most well-known stories in the Old Testament. And so I'll go through it quickly. We read in Genesis that Joseph, this guy Joseph, is the favorite son of the favorite wife of Jacob. And Joseph has 12 half-brothers. And one day he goes to look for his brothers. And we read in Genesis, this is in chapter 37, verse 18. But they, the brothers, they saw him in the distance. And before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. So this is like some very intense sibling rivalry. They grab him. They throw him in a pit. They have this argument. Should we kill him? Should we sell him? Should we kill him? Should we sell him? They have some small amount of mercy, so they decide not to kill him, but instead to sell him to some guys who are going down to Egypt. And by all accounts, he's 17 years old, and he has done nothing wrong other than being kind of like a goody two-shoes, suck-up little brother. 17, gets sold. He shows up in Egypt. He's sold into slavery. This rich boy from this rich family with a bright future, and then all of a sudden he's being sold into slavery. That is uncertainty. That is uncertainty. Uncertainty like none of us living in this century have really ever experienced. Chapter 39 says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. This part's really important. But the Lord was with Joseph. Scripture reassures us, the narrator of the story reassures us that though Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, the Lord was with him. And you're like, what But if the Lord was with Joseph, he wouldn't have been sold into slavery, right? A big hand would have appeared out of the sky and said, "Don't worry, Joseph. This is all going to work out for good. Just hang in there, buddy." Or maybe that hand would have stopped it altogether. That's what's supposed to happen, right? The voice of God is supposed to appear and kind of pat Joseph on the back and be like, "Don't worry, this is all going to turn out for good." The narrator of the story says that God was with Joseph, but that isn't really apparent in the story. And it's certainly not apparent to Joseph because he's not hearing this narrator. This is us as the listeners of the story hearing it. And that's going to be a main theme of this story. It's going to be a reoccurring theme. The fact that things are not going your way is not evidence that God is not with you. The fact that things are not going your way is not evidence that God is not with you. So it gets worse for Joseph. After he gets sold, there's that whole thing that happens with Potiphar's wife. You guys know the story. If you don't know the story, then watch Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, because I can't get into all of it or we'd be here all day. But Joseph was thrown into prison for seducing Potiphar's wife, which he didn't even do. And the whole time this is happening, there are like no miracles in the story. A lot of these Old Testament stories have miracles, right? People are saved from lions and people are saved from fiery furnaces, but there are no miracles in this Joseph story, which I think actually, I like that. I think it actually helps make the story a lot more relatable to the hardships and the trials and tribulations of our everyday life. So God is kind of like nowhere to be seen. And what does Joseph do when everything is going wrong? He's sold into slavery. He tries to do the right thing with Potiphar's wife, and then he's still thrown into jail. What does he do when all this stuff is just going wrong and God seems really silent and seems nowhere to be seen? What does he do? Well, to answer this very deep question, I have to ask another very deep question, which is, has anybody here seen the movie Frozen 2? I think a lot of you probably have, because we have a lot of parents with young kiddos in our church. If not, you absolutely should, and adults too, even if you have no kids. It's an excellent movie. My kids are obsessed with this movie, and I know there's some other Riverfront kiddos who love this movie too. Shout out to Emma Bouclier, who dressed up as Elsa for our Halloween party last week. But I'm going to give you a little tiny snapshot into Frozen 2. I hope I'm not ruining it for anybody. I won't tell you what the ending is, but there's this scene where Anna, one of the sister princesses, thinks that her sister Elsa has died. And she is overcome with grief. And there's this scene where she's sitting in this dark cave. You guys know the scene. And she is just feeling this crushing burden of grief that those of us who have lost a loved one know what that feels like. And she's crushed with grief. And what does she do in this situation? Of course, she sings a song because she's a Disney princess. And what else would a Disney princess do when grieving but sing a song? And the song is called Do the Next Right Thing. You guys know this song? I won't sing it. Maybe I can make a rune and sing it later. She sings a song called Do the Next Right Thing. And Joseph, our boy Joseph, the main character of this story, he basically could have written this exact same song. So I'm going to read the lyrics to you. If you're at home and you know it, you can sing along as I read it. I won't sing it because nobody wants to hear that. But I will read the lyrics to you because Joseph, faced with all this uncertainty and all this hardship, basically could have written this song. So she sings, "I've seen the dark before, but not like this. This is cold. This is empty. This is numb. The life I knew is over. The lights are out. Hello, darkness. I'm ready to succumb." Have you ever felt that way? But a tiny voice whispers in my mind, "You are lost. Hope is gone, but you must go on and do the next right thing." Do the next right thing. And this is basically what Joseph does when God is totally silent. He takes a page from Princess Anna's playbook. He just keeps doing that next right thing, keeps putting one foot in front of the other and seeing what in his immediate circumstances he can do that is the next right thing. He turns down Potiphar's wife. He helps the people in prison with him that God has put before him in prison by interpreting their dreams. He keeps acting like someone who knows deep down inside that God is with him, even when that is not apparent in the circumstances of his life. So 13 years go by like this. It's a long time. And for all he knows, he's going to spend the rest of his days in an Egyptian prison, in a dungeon. And then Pharaoh has this dream, and Joseph is brought to Pharaoh to interpret the dream just like he had done in prison, because his name had gotten around that he could interpret dreams. And he interprets it correctly. Pharaoh lets him out of prison. Then fast forward, there is this famine in the land. It's like across the whole world. And Joseph comes up with this business plan to save the nation. You guys know this story. You should really go back and read the whole thing because it's a great story. So there's this famine, and it's all over the world, including where Joseph's brothers live. So the whole world is in famine, but Egypt has plenty of food because of this great business plan and Joseph's ability to interpret Pharaoh's dream. And so Joseph's brothers, come to Egypt to buy grain because they have no food where they live. And guess who they have to buy it from? Dum, da, dum, dum. Joseph, their brother, who they sold into slavery. And Joseph was perfectly positioned in this moment to help the nation of Israel, which comes from these 12 brothers. Had he not been there, who knows if Jacob's descendants would have survived? Who knows if they would have survived? And you know who was further down the line of Jacob's descendants, those 12 tribes of Israel? Yeah, Jesus comes from one of those 12 tribes of Israel. And so after the famine, some time goes by, and then we get to the passage that we read today in Genesis 50 at the end of this story. Jacob dies. The brothers and Joseph's father, Jacob, dies. And when this happens, the brothers start to worry. Like, well, maybe Joseph has been kind to us because our dad is alive, but, how's he going to be? Is he going to take revenge on us now that our dad is gone? And they start to worry that now that Joseph holds this power over them, that he'll finally enact his revenge that he had been waiting for because of the awful things that the brothers did to him. And he says this in verse 19, and this is what we read today. He said, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Throughout those 13 years of hardship, Joseph says, God was with me. Every day, Joseph got up and he acted like a man who was confident that God was with him. Even when it was not evident in the story, he did the next right thing. And eventually, after 13 years, things turned out okay for Joseph. But even when things turned around and he gained some power, he didn't act from a place of revenge. He continued to do the next right thing, whether he had power or whether he had no power. So in your uncertain circumstances, in our uncertain circumstances, what would someone do if they were absolutely confident that God was with them? What is the next right thing for you to do today and tomorrow and Tuesday and Wednesday? Obviously, voting. You should all go out and vote on Tuesday if you haven't already, filled out a absentee ballot or something. But then what? If your side comes out on top, will you desire revenge, or will you have an attitude like Joseph's? Most of you know that I have twins, biological twins, and they came to me via cesarean section. I promise I'm going to relate this back to Joseph, don't worry. And I don't know if any of you all have had a C-section, but when you have a C-section, they put this huge cloth up that kind of like splits your body in two. And from this side up, and that's where your partner is, like that's where Arunan was, it's your head and it's your arms and it's you. And then from this side down, that's like where the blood and gore happens. And you're kind of split in two pieces. And all the medical staff is on the other side of the cloth. And it's really just like the anesthesiologist and your partner on this side of the cloth with you. And the thing that drove me crazy during my C-section, I don't know if any of you guys have had this experience, that all the medical team that was on the lower part of the bifurcation of the cloth, so it was like 2 pediatricians because I had twins, my OBGYN, all the nurse staff, all of that, like probably like 6 or 7 people. You know, they were kind of just like chit-chatting about whatever they felt like. I remember they were talking about what song to put on the radio, and one of the other nurses was like talking about something going on with his kids, some drama, and somebody else was like ribbing him for it. And I just wanted to be like, listen, can you concentrate? Because this is like a big deal. You got to like knock off the small talk because this is like a huge deal. I'm about to have major surgery. Can you please talk about medical things and like what is going to happen to me in taking these 2 human beings out of my stomach? I'm like on my side of the cloth praying like crazy, feeling all this anxiety. But the medical team was acting like this major surgery was the most routine thing in the world. It was nothing to worry about, so much so that they like didn't even really need to talk about it. I'm sure at some point they did. Because to them, it was the most routine thing in the world. My OBGYN was like in her 60s and she did multiple C-sections a day. So multiply that by how many she had done. It was a pretty routine thing for her. I told you I was going to bring this back to the story. But coming away from that experience, not in the moment, but coming away from that experience, I thought, you know, that's how it is with God. That's how it is with God. I'm over here on my side of the blue cloth in a totally uncertain world with no idea what to expect, and everything is new. I'm doing this for the first time, and everything is scary, and everything is new. Meanwhile, God is over on her side of the cloth saying, I do this all the time. I do this all the time. I am the master of uncertainty. I am not stressed. I am not out of control. I just need you to lay there and trust me. Trust me. I do this all the time. So friends, you know, from your perspective, on your side of the blue cloth, things are looking a little bit out of control, right? And we're fearful and we're anxious. With good reason. And we've never done this before. We've never had a president like this before. And we've never had an election like this before, at least in my lifetime. And I want to honor that because that fear is real. And what happens on Tuesday is going to affect real things in real people's lives. But from God's perspective, uncertain times are opportunities to do something in us. Why? They're opportunities because God can do more in us during times of uncertainty than she ever could in that normal 9 to 5, everything is the way it's supposed to be times. Why? Andy Stanley says this. He says, all of us have a natural inclination to lean on and trust the things that we create or are created by somebody else. Our jobs, our businesses, our finances, our 401ks, our network of friends, our families, our good health. I'll add our governmental systems and our elected officials. And all of these things to us in our little world, they represent structure, familiarity, and order. And there's nothing wrong with that. It is it is the fact that we were made in the image of God that motivates us to create order from chaos. That's what God did, right? But these structures can become comfort zones that wean us away from dependence on God. And so when our structures are shaken, like they are being shaken for so many of us right now, when we move through transitions, God suddenly has our undivided attention. And when God has our undivided attention, we are positioned to grow like crazy. And I have a feeling that a lot of us right now, even if we are doing absolutely nothing, and even if we are feeling like complete failures at life, like I know I am, I have a feeling that a lot of us are actually growing like crazy, even though we might not know it. And I think when we look back on 2020, we're going to see that we actually did grow even when we were unaware of it. You know, Joseph, he didn't see himself as a victim of his circumstances. He saw himself as a player in God's story. He didn't know it during those 13 years of hardship, but he had a leading role in the story that God was writing. And our response, it must be like his. You know, my boss, my ex-husband, my children, my school, my elected official, my president, my teacher, he or she might have meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. What would someone in your situation act like if she were confident, if he were confident that God was with him? Because your God and my God, he is the master of squeezing good out of uncertainty. And all we have to do is lay our concerns before him. Seek her kingdom first. Get up every morning, on Wednesday morning and every other morning after that, and do what anyone in our circumstances would do if they were confident that God were with them. Do the next right thing. Just do the next right thing. And like Joseph, we will one day look back and breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that God never left us, that whatever fill in the blank meant for evil, God used for good. Because God does her greatest, his most significant works in us, both individually and communally, during times of uncertainty in your lives and in mine. May each of you know, going forth today, deep, deep, deep in your bones, that God has not left you this week. May you hear that narrator of the story saying, but God was with him, but God was with her. May you feel God holding you close, no matter what happens on Tuesday. Amen.